The snow was falling in thick, silent sheets outside our floor-to-ceiling windows when Marcus dropped the news. I was arranging white orchids in the crystal vase, the baccarat one his mother had given us last Christmas, when his words cut through the quiet evening like a blade. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Vanessa's coming for Christmas. My hands stilled on the delicate petals. Vanessa. The name he'd barely mentioned in our 3 years of marriage except in passing. Always with that slight catch in his voice that made my stomach tighten. Your ex-girlfriend, Vanessa? I kept my tone light, carefully placing another stem into the arrangement. The reflection in the window showed Marcus loosening his tie, his face carrying that particular expression of practiced nonchalance that I'd learned meant he was hiding something important. Ex-fiancé, technically. He moved to the bar cart, pouring himself 2 fingers of bourbon. She's going through a rough divorce. Her family is all in Europe now, and she mentioned she'd be alone for the holidays. It felt wrong not to offer. I turned slowly, watching him avoid my eyes. 3 years of marriage, and I'd become fluent in his tells. The way he swirled his drink counterclockwise when nervous. How his left eyebrow twitched microscopically when he was testing boundaries. Both tells were firing now. That's very generous of you, I said, each word measured and soft. When did you speak with her? She called the office yesterday. He finally met my gaze, his confidence returning now that I hadn't exploded. Come on, Lily. We're adults. That was all ancient history, 7 years ago. I thought you'd understand. I did understand. I understood perfectly, but not in the way Marcus assumed. Of course, I smiled, the same warm smile that had disarmed countless business adversaries across negotiation tables they never knew I controlled. It's Christmas, the season of compassion. Relief washed over his features. He crossed the room and kissed my forehead, his cologne. Tom Ford, the expensive one I'd bought him, enveloping me. You're amazing, you know that? Vanessa always said you seemed incredibly kind. My smile didn't waver. When did Vanessa say that? Oh, she follows your Instagram. She mentioned it when we talked. He checked his watch. A Patek Philippe I'd noticed appeared 3 months ago, despite our joint account showing no such purchase. I've got to jump on a call with Singapore. The Melbourne acquisition is heating up. I watched him disappear into his home office, the door clicking shut with finality. The Melbourne acquisition. The same deal I'd been monitoring through my private alerts for weeks, ever since my actual company's intelligence division flagged unusual trading patterns around Hartman and Associates, the mid-sized firm Marcus claimed to work for as a senior consultant. I returned to the orchids, my mind already several moves ahead. Most people would have felt threatened, jealous, or angry. I felt none of those things. I felt the particular clarity that comes from seeing a pattern finally complete itself, like the last piece of a puzzle sliding into place. My phone buzzed. A text from Diana, my executive assistant at Meridian Global, though Marcus knew her only as my friend from book club. Background check complete. Sending encrypted files now. I moved through the living room, past the Rothko that Marcus believed was a reproduction, past the first edition Hemingways he'd never questioned, and into my own study. The door locked automatically behind me. The soundproofing I'd installed during renovations last year, ensuring complete privacy. 3 monitors illuminated as I sat down, facial recognition activating my systems. The files Diana sent painted an interesting picture. Vanessa Chen, former model, current lifestyle influencer, with a modest following of 42,000, recently separated from her husband of 18 months, a hedge fund manager named Bradley Sutton. No children, no substantial assets of her own. Her divorce filing cited irreconcilable differences, but my investigators had found something more interesting. Bradley had discovered she'd been siphoning money from their joint accounts to fund a lifestyle her actual earnings couldn't support. But that wasn't what made my pulse quicken. The metadata on her phone records showed something fascinating. Vanessa and Marcus hadn't just spoken yesterday. They'd been in regular contact for the past 8 months. Text messages, phone calls, and 3 separate lunch meetings in the city, all carefully scheduled during what Marcus told me were client meetings. I opened another file. Financial records I'd obtained through perfectly legal, if creative, channels. Marcus's personal credit card, the one he thought was completely separate from our marriage, showed charges that told a story. Jewelry purchases from Cartier, dinner at 11 Madison Park, a weekend stay at the Greenwich Hotel, all in the past 6 months, all on dates when he'd told me he was traveling for work. I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled, watching the snow fall harder outside my window. The view from here showed our neighborhood, the affluent Connecticut enclave where we'd bought this house 2 years ago, where Marcus had insisted we buy this house, specifically on this street, in this particular style. At the time, I'd found his enthusiasm charming. Marcus rarely showed strong preferences about anything. Now, looking at Vanessa's social media history on my screen, I understood why. This neighborhood, this street, even this specific style of house. It was all in her Pinterest boards from 5 years ago. Her dream home aesthetic, her perfect life vision. Marcus hadn't been building a life with me. He'd been building the life he'd planned with her, just with a different woman playing the role. My phone buzzed again. This time, Elena, my head of private security, surveillance team in place. Shall we proceed with the secondary investigation? I typed back, proceed. And Elena, expand the scope. I want to know everything. The study door was engineered to alert me to any approach. I had 17 minutes before Marcus would finish his call and come looking for me. 17 minutes to decide how to play this. I could confront him now, armed with evidence. I could throw him out, file for divorce, take half of everything he thought he had. But that would be simple, predictable, and it wouldn't answer the question burning in my mind. What exactly was Marcus planning? Because men like Marcus, men who orchestrated elaborate deceptions, who maintained secret relationships, who built fake lives like elaborate stage sets, they always had an endgame. I opened a new browser window and pulled up the incorporation documents for Hartman and Associates, the firm where Marcus supposedly worked as a senior consultant, pulling in a comfortable $200,000 a year. Except Hartman and Associates was more interesting than that. The company had been founded 3 years ago, right around the time Marcus and I met. Its primary business was listed as strategic consulting, that beautiful, vague term that could mean anything. It had exactly 3 major clients on record, all of them shell companies registered in Delaware. And the majority shareholder? A holding company based in the Cayman Islands. I discovered this 6 months ago, during one of my routine background checks on our household finances. At the time, I'd filed it away as merely suspicious. Now, with Vanessa's impending Christmas visit, it took on new significance. My personal email pinged. Diana again, this time with a file labeled Property Records Urgent. I opened it and felt my expression shift into something colder. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Vanessa Chen had purchased a property in Connecticut 3 months ago, a charming colonial on Willow Creek Lane, exactly 4 miles from our house. She'd paid cash, $2.3 million, despite having no visible means to afford such a purchase. The transaction had been handled through an LLC. And when I traced that LLC back through its maze of corporate structures, I found something delicious. Marcus was listed as the registered agent. I heard his office door open, his footsteps in the hallway. I had perhaps 90 seconds. I closed all the sensitive windows, pulled up a recipe blog for Christmas dinner, and unlocked my study door just as Marcus knocked. "Hey," he said, leaning against the doorframe with studied casualness. "What you doing?" "Planning the menu for Christmas dinner," I said, gesturing to the screen. "If Vanessa's coming, I want everything to be perfect. Does she have any dietary restrictions?" The question landed exactly as I'd intended. Marcus's expression flickered. Surprise, then pleasure, then something else I couldn't quite identify. "She's vegetarian now, actually. She mentioned it in passing." "How thoughtful of you to remember." I stood, smoothing my cashmere sweater. "I'll make sure to plan accordingly." "Will she be staying here, or did you book her a hotel?" "I figured she could take the guest suite. If that's okay with you?" "Of course." I moved past him into the hallway. "It's your home, too." Actually, it wasn't. The house was in my name only, purchased with funds from my actual income. But Marcus didn't know that, just as he didn't know most things about the woman he'd married. We'd met at a gallery opening in Manhattan 3 years ago. I'd been there as Lily Morrison, art enthusiast, and trust fund beneficiary. My cover identity for social situations were being recognized as Lily Morrison Chen, founder and CEO of Meridian Global, would complicate things. Meridian Global was a private equity firm I'd built from the ground up over 12 years, starting with the inheritance from my grandmother and ending with a portfolio worth north of $3 billion. We specialized in acquiring distressed assets and turning them around, a process that required discretion, strategic thinking, and absolute ruthlessness when necessary. I'd learned early in my career that being a woman in finance meant every interaction was colored by assumptions. Men underestimated me. They saw the blonde hair, the delicate features, the soft voice, and they made calculations that always added up wrong. So I'd created Lily Morrison, the dilettante, the trust fund princess who dabbled in charity work and collected art. She was perfect camouflage, allowing me to move through certain social circles without the baggage of my professional reputation. Marcus had taken the bait beautifully. He'd approached me at the gallery with practiced charm, clearly identifying me as exactly the kind of woman he was looking for: attractive, wealthy, and seemingly not too bright. Our courtship had been whirlwind by design. His design, though he thought it was his idea, I'd wanted to see how far he'd take it, how elaborate the con would become, because I'd known from our second date that Marcus was running a game. My security team had flagged inconsistencies in his background within 24 hours of our first meeting. The prestigious MBA from Wharton? Real, but he'd barely graduated. The successful consulting career? More complicated than he presented. The wealthy Connecticut family? Middle class at best, and he'd been estranged from them for years. But I'd been curious. And perhaps, in some small corner of my heart I rarely examined, I'd wanted to believe I could be wrong. That maybe Marcus was just a man reinventing himself, trying to level up to a world he aspired to join. The first year of our marriage had been pleasant enough. Marcus played the attentive husband beautifully. He worked long hours, or claimed to. He remembered birthdays and anniversaries. He said the right things at dinner parties with my supposed trust fund friends. He also spent money with increasing freedom, upgraded his wardrobe dramatically, and started making noises about investment opportunities that always seemed to require my financial input. I documented everything while maintaining my facade of sweet, trusting naivety. "I'm thinking of inviting a few people for Christmas Eve," I said now, following Marcus into the kitchen. "Since we'll have Vanessa here, it might be nice to make it a real gathering." "Like who?" He was already on his phone, scrolling through something he angled away from my view. "Oh, Diana and her husband, maybe Robert from the museum board. Keep it intimate. 10 or 12 people. Whatever you want, babe." He barely looked up. "I need to run out for a bit. Meeting Jonathan for drinks." Jonathan, the fictional business partner who appeared whenever Marcus needed an alibi. I'd had Elena's team follow him on 3 separate Jonathan nights. Once he'd actually met with Vanessa. The other 2 times he'd gone to a poker game in a basement in Queens, the kind where the stakes were high and the participants were men trying desperately to look successful. "Drive safe," I called as he grabbed his keys. "It's getting icy out there." The door closed behind him. I waited exactly 45 seconds, watching through the window as his BMW, the one he'd wanted so badly, the one I'd bought him for his birthday, pulled out of the driveway. Then I returned to my study and made a phone call. "Diana, it's time to accelerate our timeline. I need you to send out some very special Christmas invitations." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of holiday preparations that had nothing to do with turkey and everything to do with strategy. Diana worked her magic through back channels. My head of security, Elena, positioned her team. My attorneys reviewed documents I'd been preparing for months, and I played the role of dutiful wife with Academy Award-worthy commitment. Marcus grew increasingly distracted as Christmas approached. He took more client calls behind closed doors. He went on more business dinners with fictional colleagues. His phone was never more than 6 inches from his reach. I watched it all with the detached interest of a scientist observing a predictable experiment. On December 20th, Vanessa confirmed her arrival for Christmas Eve. Marcus told me over breakfast, his tone carefully casual. "She'll get in around 2 on the 24th. I said I'd pick her up from the station." "I'll come with you," I offered, sipping my coffee. "It would be nice to finally meet her properly." "Actually, I thought I'd go alone. Give us a chance to catch up. It's been years." "Of course," I smiled. "That makes sense." It made perfect sense. It gave them time to align their stories, to make sure their carefully constructed narratives matched. Time to prepare for whatever performance they'd planned for Christmas. What they didn't know was that I'd already prepared a performance of my own. On December 23rd, my carefully selected Christmas Eve guests began confirming their attendance. Diana and her husband, yes. Robert from the museum board, yes. And then the others, the ones whose acceptances made my pulse quicken with anticipation. Catherine Hartman, founding partner of Hartman and Associates. Bradley Sutton, Vanessa's soon-to-be ex-husband. And Amanda Torres, Marcus's actual ex-wife from a marriage he'd never mentioned to me. The one I'd discovered during my initial background investigation 3 years ago. The one he'd married for 6 months in his mid-20s. A relationship that ended when she'd discovered he'd emptied their joint savings account and disappeared. I'd found Amanda living in Portland, working as a nurse, still carrying the financial scars of what Marcus had done. She'd been surprised to receive my invitation, confused even, until I'd explained that this was her chance to watch karma come full circle. Christmas Eve morning dawned clear and brutally cold. I woke early, sliding out of bed without disturbing Marcus, who'd come home late the night before reeking of expensive whiskey and cheap perfume. In my study, I reviewed the final preparations. Everything was in place. The guest list, confirmed. The documentation, prepared. The exits, covered. Elena's team had even swept the house for any surveillance devices. I wouldn't put it past Marcus to have planted cameras, given his level of planning. We'd found 2. One in my study, poorly hidden behind a book. One in our bedroom closet, angled to capture the safe where I supposedly kept my trust fund documents. I'd left them active but fed them carefully curated footage showing exactly what I wanted Marcus to see. At noon, I began preparing for the evening. I chose my outfit with care. A silk dress in deep emerald, Louboutin heels, understated jewelry. The kind of outfit that looked effortless but cost more than most people's monthly rent. I wanted to look perfect. Not for Marcus or Vanessa, but for myself. For the moment when everything I'd built toward finally crystallized. At 1:30, Marcus came downstairs showered and dressed in the Brioni suit I'd bought him. He looked good, I'd give him that. Handsome in that polished way that came from expensive grooming and confidence built on lies. "I'm heading out to get Vanessa," he said, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. "I'll be back by 3. I'll have everything ready." I kissed his cheek, tasting his cologne. "Drive safe." He left, and I counted to 60 before pulling out my phone. "Elena, he's on the move. Are we tracking?" "GPS active. He's heading to the train station as expected." "Perfect. And our other guests?" "Catherine Hartman will arrive at 4. Bradley, Sutton at 4:15. Amanda Torres at 4:30. Your friend Diana and the rest at 5. Excellent." I looked around the living room, at the perfectly decorated tree, the artfully arranged presents, the Christmas magic that masked something much darker underneath. Let's make sure this is a holiday no one forgets. I spent the next hour in the kitchen, putting final touches on the feast I'd actually hired a chef to prepare, but would present as my own work. The roasted root vegetables, the mushroom Wellington for Vanessa, the sides that would feed 12 people comfortably. At 3:15, I heard Marcus's car in the driveway. I positioned myself in the living room, wine glass in hand, the picture of domestic contentment. The door opened. Marcus came in first, carrying expensive luggage that definitely hadn't come from Target. And behind him, shaking snow from her coat, came Vanessa. She was beautiful. I'd expected that from her Instagram, but seeing her in person added dimensions the camera missed. Tall, willowy, with the kind of bone structure that made photographers weep. She wore casual elegance, jeans that probably cost $800, a cashmere sweater, boots that screamed Italian leather. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the calculation there. The assessment. She was sizing up the competition, even as her face arranged itself into a warm smile. "Lily," she said, her voice melodious. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you. Marcus has told me so much." I bet he had. "Vanessa." I crossed the room, embracing her in a hug that she returned with just slightly too much enthusiasm. "I'm so glad you could join us. I can't imagine spending Christmas alone." You're too kind to have me. She pulled back, her hand lingering on my arm. Your home is absolutely beautiful. Marcus said you had exquisite taste, but this exceeds everything I imagined. There it was. The first subtle dig wrapped in a compliment. She knew about the house, had probably seen photos, maybe had even driven by before today. Let me show you to your room, I said warmly. You must be exhausted from traveling. I led her upstairs, Marcus following with her bags, and showed her to the guest suite. I'd prepared it carefully, fresh flowers, luxury linens, a basket of high-end toiletries. Everything perfect. Everything monitored. Because yes, I'd installed my own cameras in the guest suite. Tiny pinhole devices that Elena's team had assured me were undetectable without specialized equipment. This is lovely, Vanessa said, setting her purse on the bed. You've thought of everything. I try. I smiled. Dinner is at 6. We're having a few friends join us. I hope you don't mind. I thought it would be festive. I watched her face carefully. The micro expression of surprise, quickly masked. That sounds wonderful, she said, but her eyes cut to Marcus, a silent question passing between them. Great, I said brightly. I'll leave you to settle in. Marcus, could you help me with something downstairs? We left Vanessa in her room and descended to the first floor. As soon as we were out of earshot, Marcus grabbed my arm. You didn't mention we were having guests. His voice was tight. Didn't I? I blinked innocently. I thought I told you. Just a small gathering. Very intimate. How many people? 10, including us. Why? Is that a problem? He released my arm, visibly trying to calm himself. No, of course not. I thought it would be just the 3 of us tonight. On Christmas Eve? Don't be silly. Christmas is for sharing. I touched his face gently. You seem stressed. Is everything okay? Fine. Everything's fine. He pulled away, checking his phone. I need to make a call. He disappeared into his office, and I heard the door lock. I checked my watch. 3:45. In 15 minutes, Catherine Hartman would arrive. The woman Marcus supposedly worked for. The woman who would have very interesting things to say about his employment status. I returned to the kitchen, pulling out wine glasses, setting up the bar area. Everything had to be perfect. Every detail mattered. At precisely 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Catherine Hartman, exactly as her photos had shown. Late 50s, silver hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She wore a designer coat and carried a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Vanessa's boots. Ms. Hartman, I said warmly, thank you so much for coming. Please, call me Catherine. She handed me the wine, her eyes scanning the interior of the house with professional assessment. And thank you for the invitation. I have to admit, I was intrigued. I thought it was time we met properly. I took her coat. Can I get you a drink? Vodka martini if you have it. I made her drink while Marcus emerged from his office, drawn by the sound of voices. He froze when he saw Catherine. The expression on his face was worth every penny I'd spent on investigators, every hour of planning. It was the look of a man watching his careful house of cards begin to tremble. Marcus, Catherine said pleasantly. What a surprise. I didn't realize you knew Lily. I watched him struggle, saw the wheels turning as he tried to calculate the best response. Catherine, yes, Lily and I are married. I finished smoothly, sliding an arm through his. 3 years this past September. Marcus works for you, doesn't he? He's told me so much about Hartman and Associates. The silence that followed was exquisite. Catherine's eyebrows rose fractionally. I see. How interesting. Marcus's face had gone pale. I should explain. The doorbell rang again. Excuse me, I said brightly. More guests arriving? This time it was Bradley Sutton, Vanessa's soon-to-be ex-husband. He was handsome in that Greenwich hedge fund way. Strong jaw, expensive haircut, the kind of confident posture that came from never having been told no. You must be Lily, he said, his handshake firm. Bradley Sutton, thank you for having me. My pleasure. Come in, let me take your coat. From upstairs, I heard a door open. Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs, and the expression on her face when she saw Bradley was everything I'd hoped for. Pure, undiluted shock. She recovered quickly. I had to give her credit for that, but not before I'd seen the fear flash in her eyes. Bradley, she said, descending the stairs with forced calm. What are you doing here? Lily invited me, he said, his voice pleasant but his eyes cold. Said it was a Christmas gathering. I had no idea you'd be here, V. What a coincidence. Marcus had moved to the bottom of the stairs, positioning himself between them. The protective gesture was subtle but unmistakable. This is unexpected, Vanessa said, her voice tight. The doorbell rang a third time. I'll get it, Marcus said quickly, desperate for escape. But I was faster. No, darling, you entertain our guests. I've got it. I opened the door to Amanda Torres. She looked different from her photos, older, more tired, but with something fierce in her eyes. Something that recognized justice when it came calling. Amanda, I said warmly. I'm so glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it for the world, she replied, her voice carrying into the living room where Marcus stood frozen. I watched him recognize her. Watched the color drain completely from his face as he understood finally that this wasn't a Christmas party. It was a reckoning. Everyone, I said brightly, closing the door and turning to face the assembled group. Now that some of our key guests have arrived, why don't we all have a drink? I think we have quite a bit to discuss. Marcus's eyes met mine across the room. In them, I finally saw what I'd been waiting for. He knew. He knew that I knew. And he knew that whatever he'd been planning, whatever game he'd thought he was playing, I was 10 moves ahead. I smiled at him, the same warm smile I'd given him every day of our marriage. Merry Christmas, darling, I said softly. Let's make this a night to remember. The living room had transformed from a festive gathering space into something resembling a courtroom. 7 people stood in various stages of confusion, suspicion, and dawning horror, all watching me with expressions that ranged from curious to terrified. I moved to the center of the room, wine glass in hand, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me like a familiar coat. I'm sure you're all wondering why I've gathered you here tonight, I began, and despite the tension, I caught Marcus's bitter laugh at the cliché. Let me start with introductions, since not everyone knows each other. I gestured to Catherine Hartman, who stood near the fireplace looking fascinated. This is Catherine Hartman, founding partner of Hartman & Associates, the consulting firm where Marcus claims to work as a senior consultant. Marcus's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. This is Bradley Sutton, Vanessa's current husband. Excuse me, soon-to-be ex-husband. Bradley raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. And this is Amanda Torres, who some of you don't know, but who Marcus knows very well. Amanda stepped forward, her eyes locked on Marcus. Hello, David. The name hung in the air like a grenade. Vanessa's head snapped toward Marcus. David! That's the name he used when we were married. Amanda continued, her voice steady despite the tremor I could hear beneath it. David Morrison. He told me he was an investment banker. Told me we were building a future together. Then one day I came home and found our savings account empty and him gone. Marcus's face had gone from pale to ashen. Amanda, I can explain. No, I interrupted gently. You really can't. But let me help fill in the blanks for everyone. I walked to the bookshelf and retrieved a leather portfolio I'd placed there earlier. Inside were copies of documents, bank statements, incorporation papers, photographs, text message records. Marcus, or David, or whatever his name really is, has been running variations of the same con for at least 8 years. I distributed copies to each person in the room. He identifies wealthy women, creates an elaborate persona, marries them, and then systematically drains their resources. Amanda was his first wife that I could find. There may be others. This is insane, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Lily, what are you doing? I'm finishing what you started. I turned to Vanessa. Your turn in this scheme was particularly clever. Marcus couldn't exactly divorce me without risking exposure. I'd been too careful with the prenup he'd signed, thinking it was standard paperwork, so he needed a different approach. Vanessa's perfect composure was cracking. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? I pulled out my phone and connected it to the TV mounted above the fireplace. Screenshots appeared, text messages between Vanessa and Marcus dating back 8 months. Vanessa. Bradley's getting suspicious. We need to move faster. Marcus. Lily trusts me completely. Once we get her to invest in the opportunity, we can disappear with everything. Vanessa. What about the house? I want the house. Marcus. That's trickier. It's in her name, but I'm working on it. The room was silent except for the crackling fire. I scrolled through more messages, each one more damning than the last. You see, the plan was elegant, I continued. Vanessa would show up for Christmas, the devastated ex-fiancé going through a difficult divorce. She'd befriend me, gain my trust. We'd become close. Maybe she'd even stay in Connecticut, in that house Marcus helped her buy, the one 4 miles from here. Bradley's expression hardened. That's where the money went. The $2 million you moved from our joint investment account. Over time, I continued, Vanessa would help Marcus convince me to invest in a can't-miss opportunity. Probably through Hartman and Associates, which isn't really a consulting firm at all. Catherine Hartman spoke up for the first time since the revelations began. It's a shell company. I discovered it 6 months ago when someone used my name and credentials without permission. I've been trying to track down who was behind it. That would be Marcus, I said. He created Hartman and Associates 3 years ago as a legitimate-looking front for his operations. The 3 clients on record are all fake companies he controls. The Cayman Islands holding company that owns the majority share? Also him, hidden behind layers of corporate structures. Marcus finally found his voice. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can. I pulled out another document. I've had private investigators following you for 18 months. I have photographs of you and Vanessa together. I have bank records showing money transfers. I have recordings of your phone calls discussing the Lily project. Yes, that's what you called it. I turned to face him fully. But here's what you didn't know. Everything you thought you knew about me was a lie. I pulled out my real driver's license, the one with my full legal name. My name isn't Lily Morrison. It's Lily Morrison Chen. I'm the founder and CEO of Meridian Global, a private equity firm worth approximately $3 billion. The shock on Marcus's face was beautiful. Vanessa actually gasped. The trust fund you thought you were stealing from doesn't exist. Every penny you've spent came from my actual earned income. Income from a company I built from nothing. This house? I bought it outright, in cash, from my own money. Those art pieces you thought were reproductions, actual originals, the book club friends you dismissed, most of them are executives from my company. I walked closer to Marcus, watching him process the magnitude of his miscalculation. I knew what you were from our second date. My security team flagged you immediately. The fake MBA credentials that were real but barely earned. The wealthy family that was actually middle class. The mysterious consulting job that didn't exist. Then why? His voice was hoarse. Why marry me? Why go through with all of this? Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. I set down my wine glass. I've spent my career dealing with men who underestimate me, who see a woman and assume incompetence. You were a perfect case study. I gave you every opportunity to be genuine, to come clean, to be the person you pretended to be. Instead, you doubled down at every turn. Amanda spoke up, her voice thick with emotion. He destroyed my life. I lost everything. My savings, my credit, my ability to trust. I spent years rebuilding. I know, I said gently, which is why I've arranged for restitution. Marcus has approximately $400,000 in assets across various accounts. Money he stole from you and probably others. I'm ensuring it's returned to its rightful owners, starting with you. You can't do that, Marcus sputtered. That money is stolen, I finished, which makes it subject to recovery through legal channels. Channels I've already initiated. Bradley was looking at Vanessa with an expression of disgust. We could have had a real marriage. I loved you. But you were just using me to fund your scheme with this con artist. Vanessa's mask finally shattered. You think you're so perfect? You with your hedge fund and your country club friends? I was a trophy to you, Bradley. Something pretty to show off at dinners. So you decided to rob me blind? He shook his head. I would have given you a fair divorce settlement. Instead, you chose to steal and conspire and... He gestured at Marcus. Whatever this is. It's pathetic is what it is, Catherine said coldly. Using my firm's name, forging documents, creating fake credentials. I could have you arrested for fraud, Mr. Morrison. Or is it Mr. Collins? I found 3 other aliases in my investigation. Marcus looked around the room, desperate. His gaze landed on me with something like hatred. You self-righteous bitch! You think you're better than me? You lied too. You pretended to be someone you weren't. You're right, I acknowledged. I did. The difference is, I lied defensively, to protect myself and my assets from people exactly like you. You lied offensively, to harm and exploit. There's a distinction. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. That would be my other guests, I said calmly. And by guests, I mean Detective Raymond Foster from the Connecticut State Police Financial Crimes Unit and Jennifer Walsh from the FBI's White Collar Crime Division. Marcus's face went from ashen to green. You called the police? Not exactly. Catherine filed a formal complaint about the identity fraud 6 weeks ago. When I reached out to her and explained what I'd discovered, we coordinated with law enforcement. They've been building a case. I walked to the door and opened it. 2 people in professional attire stood there, badges already out. Ms. Morrison Chen, Detective Foster said. Thank you for your cooperation. The pleasure is mine. I gestured inside. Marcus Morrison, Vanessa Chen, I believe these officers would like to speak with you. What followed was a chaos of rights being read, protests being ignored, and handcuffs clicking into place. Vanessa actually cried, mascara running down her perfect face. Marcus stayed silent, his expression one of utter defeat. As they were led out, Marcus paused at the door. "I hope you're happy," he said bitterly. "I'm satisfied," I corrected. "There's a difference." When the police cars pulled away, red and blue lights fading into the snowy night, I turned back to the remaining guests. Amanda was crying quietly. Catherine looked grimly pleased. Bradley seemed shell-shocked. "I'm sorry your Christmas Eve became this," I said, sincerely. "But I wanted you all to see justice done. Amanda, you deserve to know that he didn't get away with it. Bradley, you deserve to know the truth about who you married. Catherine, you deserve to see the person who stole your identity face consequences." "What happens now?" Amanda asked. "Now, the legal system takes over. Marcus and Vanessa will face charges for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The evidence is overwhelming. They'll be convicted." I moved to the bar and poured myself a fresh drink. "As for the money, Amanda, as I mentioned, you'll be made whole. It won't erase what you went through, but it's a start. Bradley, I've compiled evidence of Vanessa's financial infidelity that will help in your divorce proceedings." "Why did you help us?" Bradley asked. "You don't know any of us." "Because I've spent my career watching people like Marcus and Vanessa exploit others," I said simply. "I have the resources to stop them. It seemed wrong not to use them." Catherine raised her glass. "To justice, then. And to the most memorable Christmas Eve I've ever had." We drank to that, the four of us standing in my living room surrounded by the remnants of my elaborate trap. The rest of the evening was surprisingly pleasant. Diana and her husband arrived with the other guests I'd actually invited. Real friends who knew the real me. I explained the situation briefly, and they rallied around Amanda, Bradley, and Catherine, turning what could have been an awkward aftermath into something almost festive. We ate the dinner I'd prepared, we drank good wine, and we talked about everything except Marcus and Vanessa. It felt like an exorcism, driving out the darkness with light and laughter. Around 11, guests began departing. Amanda was the last to leave. At the door, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means. What closure means." "I think I do," I said gently. "Be well, Amanda. You survived him. That makes you stronger than he ever was." When everyone had gone, I stood alone in my living room, looking at the Christmas tree with its twinkling lights. The house was quiet except for the soft sound of snow against the windows. My phone buzzed. A message from Detective Foster. "Both suspects in custody. Initial interrogation suggests Marcus has at least 2 other victims we didn't know about. Your evidence is making this case airtight. Thank you." I typed back, "Happy to help. Justice should be more than a concept." I poured one final glass of wine and settled onto the couch, pulling a cashmere throw over my legs. 3 years. 3 years of marriage to a man who saw me as a mark. 3 years of playing a role, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. Some people might say I was cruel, that I should have simply divorced him when I first discovered the truth. But those people didn't understand the bigger picture. If I'd left Marcus quietly, he would have moved on to his next victim. He would have hurt someone else the way he'd hurt Amanda and undoubtedly others. By exposing him completely, By ensuring he faced criminal consequences, I'd stopped him permanently. Vanessa, too. She would have continued her pattern of marrying wealthy men and systematically robbing them. She would have left a trail of broken trust and empty bank accounts. Now they would both spend years in prison. They would both have criminal records that would follow them forever. They would both finally face the consequences of their choices. I thought about calling my parents, who lived in California and knew nothing about Marcus beyond what I'd told them, that he was a consultant and we were happily married. I'd have to tell them eventually, but not tonight. Tonight, I wanted to sit with the silence and the peace that came from knowing I'd done what needed to be done. My phone buzzed again. This time, an email from my legal team. Divorce proceedings initiated. Given the criminal charges and evidence of fraud, this should be straightforward. All assets are protected. Marcus has no claim to anything. I smiled. Even in the mechanics of ending a marriage, I'd been thorough. The fire was dying down. I added another log and watched the flames catch, orange and gold against the darkness. Tomorrow was Christmas. I'd spend it alone, which suddenly didn't seem sad at all. I'd spend it in my own house, surrounded by things I'd earned, living as myself, my full self, for the first time in 3 years. No more pretending to be helpless. No more playing dumb about finances. No more laughing at Marcus's jokes at my expense. Just me. Lily Morrison Chen, CEO, billionaire, survivor. I raised my glass to the empty room, to the ghosts of deceptions past and the truth finally revealed. "Merry Christmas to me," I whispered. And for the first time in 3 years, I meant it. Epilogue. 6 months later. The Connecticut courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, but then again, fraud cases rarely drew crowds. I sat in the gallery, wearing a simple black suit, my hair pulled back. Beside me, Amanda Torres sat with her hands folded in her lap. On her other side, Bradley Sutton, who'd become an unexpected friend through this whole ordeal. At the defense table, Marcus, I still couldn't think of him by any other name, sat in an orange jumpsuit. He'd lost weight. His hair needed cutting. The polish that had made him so attractive was gone, revealing the hollow man beneath. Vanessa sat at a separate table, her own attorney beside her. She'd tried to cut a deal, testifying against Marcus in exchange for a lighter sentence. It had helped, but not as much as she'd hoped. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, looked down at the defendants. "Mr. Morrison, you've been convicted of multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The evidence against you was overwhelming. You preyed on vulnerable people, exploited their trust, and showed no remorse. I'm sentencing you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release." Marcus's shoulders slumped. 12 years. He'd be nearly 50 when he got out. "Ms. Chen, your cooperation has been noted, but your actions were equally reprehensible. You helped orchestrate these schemes, targeted victims, and showed no regard for the harm you caused. I'm sentencing you to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release." Vanessa made a sound, half sob, half gasp. 8 years of her life, gone. "Both of you will also be required to make full restitution to your victims," the judge continued. "Though given your financial situations, that will likely take the form of wages earned during incarceration." The gavel came down. It was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, but we slipped out a side entrance. I'd worked hard to keep my name out of the public proceedings, protecting my business reputation. Most documents referred to me only as Victim C. "How do you feel?" Amanda asked as we walked to the parking lot. I considered the question. Satisfied, relieved, ready to move on? Me too. She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. "I got a promotion at work last week. With the restitution money, I was able to pay off my debts. I can finally breathe." "I'm glad." And I was. Amanda's recovery had been important to me in ways I didn't fully understand. Maybe because she represented what I'd protected myself from becoming, a genuine victim, destroyed by betrayal. Bradley checked his watch. "I've got to run. Meeting with my new girlfriend." We both turned to him in surprise. He laughed. I know, but she's different. A middle school teacher, makes $45,000 a year, has student loans, and she's the most genuine person I've ever met." "Good for you," I said, meaning it. After they left, I sat in my car for a moment, looking at the courthouse. Somewhere inside, Marcus and Vanessa were being processed, beginning their journey through the system that would define the next decade of their lives. I felt no pity, no regret. They'd made their choices. They'd hurt people deliberately and without remorse. Now they'd pay the price. My phone rang. Diana. "How'd it go?" 12 years for Marcus, 8 for Vanessa. "Good." I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "You coming back to the office?" "Soon. I need to make a stop first." I drove through Connecticut's winding roads, past the neighborhood where I'd lived my double life, past the house I'd already sold for twice what I'd paid for it. The new owners were a young couple with a baby on the way. I hoped they'd fill it with better memories than I'd created there. I ended up at a small cafe I'd never been to before, in a town I barely knew. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching people pass by. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the dramas and deceptions that swirled around them. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I hope you're happy. You destroyed my life. Marcus." He'd somehow gotten access to a phone. I looked at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, "No. You destroyed your own life by choosing to hurt people for profit. I just made sure you faced consequences. There's a difference. Don't contact me again." I blocked the number, then deleted the entire conversation. That chapter of my life was closed. I'd spent 3 years in a performance, playing a role, gathering evidence, waiting for justice. Now it was time to live authentically, fully, as myself. I'd learned something valuable from the experience, though. The mask I'd worn around Marcus, the helpless, naive woman, had taught me something about vulnerability, about how often people mistake kindness for weakness, gentleness for stupidity. I would never make that mistake again. But I also wouldn't close myself off entirely. There were good people in the world, people like Amanda, who'd survived betrayal and come out stronger. People like Bradley, who'd learned from his mistakes and opened his heart to someone genuine. Maybe someday I'd find someone who could love the real me, the CEO, the billionaire, the woman who'd systematically dismantled her husband's life because he'd threatened others. Someone who could see strength and strategy not as threats, but as qualities to admire. But for now, I was content with myself, with my company, with the empire I'd built and protected. I finished my coffee and stepped out into the June sunshine. Summer was coming. A season of growth and new beginnings. I pulled out my phone and called Diana. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's get back to work." Because in the end, that was who I was. Not Marcus's victim, not his wife, not even his nemesis. I was Lily Morrison Chen, CEO, survivor, victor. And I had an empire to run. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.